Welcome to Short Skirts and a Long Scripture,
where we discuss and create a space to heal from religious trauma.
Hi friends, welcome back to Short Skirts, Long Scripture podcast. I'm Cass.
I'm Hannah, and today we have a guest with us.
Hello, I'm Mia.
Hey Mia,
Welcome,
we're glad
Mia.
that you're here with us. All right, let's jump in.
Thank you.
Preliminary questions we always ask our guests. Can you tell us your background with Christianity and the church in general?
Yeah. I was born into it. I was born in Bend, Oregon, and there was a super conservative church that my parents went to. So I was like born into that. And yeah, I mean, we were like super involved in that community, and then we moved to the other side of the state. So we got involved in that whole community where I met both of you and got super involved in that community, in and out of the various drama between various churches and stuff that were there. And yeah, that's my background.
Cool. Okay, so would you want to share, or would you feel comfortable sharing how you got involved in this Christian youth group, the churches that were part of this community, this cult that we were in?
Yeah, I think what happened was, I mean, my family was always church hopping. Like there were always like all these different churches, and you go, you move to a new city, and the first thing is, oh, we have to find a church to go to. So you go and you visit a bunch of churches, and, everybody in the churches like invite you over for lunch, which is super awkward because the parents hang out, and then you kids, just like whether you like each other or not, have to play together.
Right.
And yeah, we eventually picked one, but my dad was always getting into disputes with the other dads in these churches over super minor theological differences that were way blown out of proportion. Like somebody believes like one tweak about the Bible and somebody believes another one, and they're like, we literally cannot be friends anymore. Our families can't talk to each other anymore, and we need to go find a new church. So that was like one of those rifts where we ended up getting involved in that other church.
Right. How long were you a part of this community that we were in? And when did you leave? Like, why did you leave?
I guess I got to be a part of it when I was maybe 11, 12. That's when we found that church. And then when I was 18, I left home, left the community, left everything. So that was an abrupt conclusion.
Was there any specific reasons for that you are comfortable sharing?
Oh, yeah. Interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately I left because of differences with my family. That was more like, that was the main thing. It was like I left because of my family. A lot of turmoil in the house, let's say, and it culminated. There was a culmination of events within the past. There were like a couple years leading up to that, and then the final year and final several months, there was a huge, ordeal, and then I just kind of found a place to go and left pretty much a couple days later once I found somewhere. And I think I even had the intention, I remember I had the intention to keep going to that youth group after I left home. But there was a lady who was helping me leave, and I had been in contact with her. Like we had a couple of meetings or whatever. And she was like, I just really strongly do not advise you to keep going to that youth group. She was like, I really think you should completely leave. And I
Oh.
was I had no idea what I was doing. I was basically a
I mean,
child leaving a
yeah.
very sheltered community. And
Yeah.
she was like, yeah, you shouldn't go there anymore. And I was like, okay. So I just
Oh.
didn't.
Wow.
Well,
It's a very
you were
abrupt
saved.
end to it.
Interesting
Yeah.
case. Oh my gosh. Okay, after leaving this community, you'd mentioned you wanted to kind of talk about your unpacking journey or your deconstructing journey. Do you want to talk about when that started for you and how it started for you?
Yeah, it was a very long, drawn out kind of journey because when I
Right.
left that community, I wasn't I didn't really have a problem with Christianity. Like my thinking about the whole situation was that it wasn't the problem with the religion or it wasn't the problem
Mm-hmm.
with God. It was like the problem with the people who were practicing it in
Yeah.
unethical ways. And so my thought was like, let me try to just like experience this on my own and find some people who aren't like hypocrites and abusing their power
Yep.
and see if I can like practice this on my own. And for a while I did because the way I left that situation was my older sister had left a few years ago and she
Okay.
was involved in some church in Portland, which is like an hour away from where we lived in the countryside.
Mhm.
And she knew a family who were kind of known for helping girls in need, like young women in
Oh,
need. They were sort
yeah.
of like, like single moms would come and stay with them sometimes. And
Oh.
so she heard about them and she was like, well, could my sister come and stay with you?
Oh.
And
Mhm.
they were like, yeah, sure. And they were like a super nice Christian family, but not quite as conservative as we grew up in.
Mhm.
Although now that I look back, I'm like, they are so conservative.
Yeah, it's always looking back.
But at the time it felt like paradise. It was just like
Right.
like I could listen to music that I wanted to listen to and I could like talk
Imagine.
to
Yeah.
people who I wanted to talk to and it felt like total freedom.
Mhm.
Mm.
And they were Christians also. And so I would I got really involved with their family because essentially I just like left in the middle of the night, like found out
Okay.
about them. They were like, yes, you can come and stay. And they made me come and meet them in person first. And then I'm driving home that night and it's raining. And I got in a terrible car accident on my way.
Oh my gosh.
I was actually on my way to that youth group.
I don't
Well,
think
if
I
that's
even
not
know
a
this.
sign, I don't know what is.
Right.
Right. It's like, don't go back.
Like,
You cannot.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I got in this terrible car accident,
I
totaled
remember
my
hearing
car.
about that.
Yeah. And
Oof.
and in the same like the next day, I think, I got a call that I got fired from this job
Oh,
I'd gotten
geez.
at Target
Oh no.
because they were like, you failed your drug test, which was like went in and explored and it was like because I took some cough medicine which wasn't prescribed to
Oh
me. It was
my
like prescribed to my
gosh.
brother and I took the cough medicine before the
Uh-huh.
interview and then I
Uh-huh.
didn't pass the drug test. So I had no job and no car all of a sudden. And I called that family. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this. But they were like, no, come. They're like, we have an extra car, which you can use sometimes when you need it. And our daughter works at Safeway and you can,
Wow.
she can get you a job there. So I decided
Wow.
to go ahead with the plan. I had my best friend come and get me, because I had no
Yeah.
car.
Because you're
So
stranded.
everybody in the house was gone for the morning. And I was just like, okay, you can come get me now. And she came over and would put all my stuff in the car and she drove me while the family was gone and stuff. So deconstructing
Wow.
journey, I guess, is like I was living with this family, going to church with them, and I got really involved with a bunch of friends who went to Multnomah Bible College. And so I was
Mhm.
going to like cool, trendy churches. Like,
Oh, yeah, for
Yeah.
I remember this.
yeah,
The Hillsong
where, like,
type
hipsters
churches.
go, and they
Uh-huh.
don't sing like church songs; they sing cool songs and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So I had fun. It's like I had friends, and I had freedom. I could essentially do what I wanted. I was an adult
Mhm.
and living like one. And it wasn't until I moved to North Dakota that I started questioning Christianity.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
So what happened in North Dakota then? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's a really like 180 turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that happened because the family I was living with, their daughter quit college and she needed to come live back home. So she needed her room again.
Oh, geez.
And I didn't have anywhere to go. So they were like, well, you can live in our laundry room.
Perfect.
They're like, you can sleep there, which I did for like
Oh my gosh.
at
Yeah.
least 2 months.
That must have been a big laundry room.
It was big enough for a mattress.
You stayed in a bougie
Wow.
laundry room. Okay, go on.
Right. But at some point I got fed up with it because I had a couple of houseplants and
Okay.
my houseplants died because there were no
Oh.
windows in the laundry room.
I mean,
And
I understand.
it was like a straw that broke the camel's back. It was like one of those
Yeah.
moments where it was like I kept, the kids were always running in because I didn't have a door and they were literally washing their clothes all the time because it was the laundry room.
Yeah.
And then my house plants died and I was like,
gosh.
I can't deal with this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I called my sister who lived in North Dakota. That was the time when there was a big oil boom happening there. So
Okay.
recession was happening everywhere else, but North Dakota was hopping
Yeah.
with jobs and money and stuff. So I essentially like joined the gold rush.
Yeah. The
That's
oil
crazy.
boom of North Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
How did that
So,
experience
yeah.
lead to your deconstructing, man?
I guess it happened because of my roommates. I was living in
Okay.
a house with some other girls my age. We were all going to college and we became good friends and we made friends with this house of guys who lived like in the neighborhood. And there was a whole like community who were super into like especially punk rock and like basement
Okay.
shows. They called themselves an art collective.
Right.
So they are.
Okay.
There's a lot of artists and stuff, but that was like the main thing. They would have all these like basement punk rock shows, and me and my roommates were going there and
That sounds like a great time.
listening. I don't know what's the word.
I don't know. Yeah.
So we were like going to all these shows and we made friends with all these people who are obviously very far from Christian and very far from
Right.
those. I mean, like that's the whole culture of punk rock is it's very
Yeah.
anti-establishment, religion,
Yeah.
rules, stuff like that.
Complete
And-
opposite of what we grew up with.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's just where I met. First of all, that's where I had friends who were actually queer. And
Right.
so that was honestly a huge reason
Mm.
why I completely left Christianity is because I got to a point where I was just like, in what world is it okay to not accept people for how
Yeah.
they are? Like, in what
Yeah.
world is this not okay? Or you get what I'm saying? Okay, not okay.
Yeah.
So that was really huge for me. But I remember spending like, long hours late at night, drunk with my friends in the parking lot, and we're just like having conversations about all this.
Yeah.
And my friends, I'm so like grateful for them because they they just like they challenged me, and we were having these discussions, and they were real discussions, and they're like, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And it was like all the questions that I had been pushing back in my own mind, they were making me bring them forward. And I was just like, this is such bullshit. And I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And that's when, my sister lived in that town too. And she was still super Christian, although she's not anymore. But I remember we had one big fight because she was just like, why are you not going to church anymore? And we had this whole, I told her why, like I told her my reasons. And it was fine. It was an uncomfortable conversation, but in the end, she still like loved and accepted me anyways, even though she didn't agree with my decision. But once I decided to stop, that's when I really was like, okay, I'm no longer a part of this, which is like, okay, that's like how I left the religion. And then when you say the word deconstructing, there's so much, of course, that's like, that affects you psychologically and affects how you just, I mean, those are, your core beliefs get formed from age 0 to 7 and then continue to be cemented in until age 18, whatever. So that's a lifelong journey, actually. There are always things that I'm discovering. Even now, I'm 31 and I'm still like, there'll be something that comes up and I'm like, well, that was from church.
Yep. Same.
Yep.
Same. Happens to me all the time.
Still doing that.
Yeah. I'm always
and
like,
I thought
why
I would have been done by now.
Yeah.
Right. And it shows up in other relationships too, where it'll be like, it'll be this whole like, well, I have to do the right thing so they'll accept me. And then that's just a basic one. But that shows up, of course, in many, many different scenarios and ways and iterations.
There's still a lot of that stuff that we're breaking down that I know, at least for me, when I'm talking about stuff, or it's like a trauma response at this point too. A lot of that psychological stuff. And I'm like, I don't know why this is upsetting me or where this kind of emotion is coming from. And of course, my husband doesn't understand it because he didn't come from this background. And so I have to do all the heavy work and like go back and dig into it, which is really uncomfortable still sometimes, try to figure out where the hell this is coming from. And lo and behold, it came from the cult.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to do our own digging, our own work. Although it's so funny because that life feels like a very past life. It feels so far from how I live now and who I feel that I am now.
It's a fever dream.
Yeah, and yet it's like it's
so
such
weird.
It's such a party story. Like I'm constantly telling stories about my past with my friends because it's like they're like, what is this? Like, what was your world that you lived in? And it's like it makes such interesting stories, which are also good for my own processing, I guess.
Yeah. It really is. I say I'm from a cult and people are like, hold on, back up. Can you tell me more about that? I'm like, I have stories for you.
Yeah. Endless stories.
Oh,
endless. They're like, how can anyone live like that?
I'm a substitute teacher. Yeah. Like that's what I do full time. And I use the fact that I grew up in a cult like all the time in high schools to get kids' attention. It's hilarious how fast they were all listening to you.
Yeah.
Lucky you. I can't do that in a preschool setting.
I mean, you work with babies.
Little babies.
But yeah, you're right how such a good party story, but it feels like it happened so long ago just because of how far we've come in reshaping our worldviews. I mean, at least for
Yes.
my personal experience, just the way that my belief system has changed and how, like, currently I'm still in this I love Jesus, I'm totally Christian, and all of the crap and the toxic things that we were taught, we just got rid of that. It's no longer in my mind. Now we're learning true
Yeah.
things about how Christianity is supposed to work and like still trying to learn how Christianity is supposed to work. So it's totally a process. But yeah, it feels like it was a long time ago.
And kind of on that topic and the deconstructing piece of that is like, and how this shapes who you are as a person when you grow up like that, and then as you change it as time goes by. It's like, because once I closed that door and was like, I'm not a Christian anymore, then I was like, I am gonna do all the things that I couldn't do. There is a buffet of pleasure awaiting.
Yes.
I am going to partake.
Oh my gosh.
I did that
too. Right?
Which was like,
wow.
I mean, it opened up my world in so many ways, not just in obviously the obvious ones like drinking and sex and all of that, but also like even music became such a passion for me.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't realize how much music we were missing.
Yeah.
I know.
No idea. I have years of music gap that I'm like still filling in.
I know. Even shows too. Like I watched Friends at that point.
Oh my gosh.
Wild over here.
Yeah. And so that was fun, but it was also like, you know, I remember I worked in this restaurant. This whole like being so closed and then all of a sudden being free, just no education, no knowing what was even in the world, no knowing what people were like, no discernment about what's a safe situation and what's not.
Yeah.
And you know, just a small example is I was working in a restaurant and these guys would ask me for my number, and it didn't even occur to me that I could say, no, I'm not interested. So it was just like, well, he's asking for my number, I guess I have to give it to him. And I was giving these guys my number and they're all, you know, messaging me. And I wasn't even answering them, but then going to work and everybody's like laughing at me and essentially slut shaming me because they're like, oh, she's like doing this with all these guys. And I was like, it was just so confusing and baffling to me. I was like, but I didn't even want to talk to him.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine just something as small as giving somebody your phone number. What else I thought that I couldn't say no to either.
What a great example, though, of how little information we had and how much control we had, and even knowing that we could set these boundaries that by all logical standards were completely realistic and logical. And yes, you should have these obviously to keep yourself safe, that we didn't even know about.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yes. And this is society in general. It's like a very patriarchal society. So women in general have a hard time with these. But I think for us, especially, it was just even more so. God, when I think back at like little innocent Mia, just like, you know, some guys like, oh, want to come over to my place and hang out. And I'm like, sure. And then it's just like, you know, before you know it, all this, you know, creepy, sketchy stuff is happening, and you're just like in shock too. Yeah. And that's where a lot of self-shaming ends up happening, because you go into this shame spiral of, well, I let it happen, or I got drunk, or I went there, or whatever the thing is that you did.
And because growing up, we were taught that it was always the women's fault. Whatever
Mhm.
happened
Yeah.
was always your fault. So that doesn't help either.
Exactly. And it's like what a lot of women in general, when they come into these situations and you hear this, like, well, I got abused because I allowed it to go too far, or I got assaulted or raped because I did whatever. It's like, but you go into freeze mode, like nervous system. Your nervous system goes into freeze mode because you don't know what's happening. You don't know what to do. You literally shut down your whole system, like your emotions, your critical thinking, your everything. And it's just like, okay, I'm just letting this happen. And then all of a sudden at some point you're like what happened?
How did it get so far?
Do that? And it's like, because you're an animal and you go into flight or fight. And especially for women, that's usually fight, flight, or freeze. That's usually freeze. And that happens so much with so many women.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, something you mentioned that I want to come back to that we've talked about in previous episodes of this podcast is that we didn't know we were allowed to say no. We didn't know that we were allowed to set boundaries growing up in this Christian community. And so learning that as part of the deconstructing journey was really powerful, especially for me. Knowing that I was allowed to set boundaries and that it's actually healthy to have boundaries was a really big deal for my journey. Did you have any more comments or any more thoughts about how you set up boundaries, what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, because at some point, it's like I kind of woke up and realized, like some situations happened and it was like, okay, well, this is not going to happen again. And so I went into opposite mode. And I remember my friends were always impressed and amazed because if some guy did one thing that I was like, I didn't like that, it was like, goodbye, you're gone forever, never speak to me again, and don't even think about trying to get back together. And so I really was like shut down queen. Like anybody who did the tiniest thing, it was like, get out, like forever. So I really was like a hard ass for years with that.
Was that also part of probably a safety mechanism in your brain, though, going a trigger kind of like, I'm not doing this again. Keep myself safe.
Absolutely.
You're out.
Yeah, because then like in my journey, I've also learned about attachment styles, which is
those are
essentially,
huge.
When you're a baby, you develop an attachment style based on what kind of attention you got from your caregivers. And so there are like, when the people who are supposed to like love you and take care of you leave you, then how do you act? You can either act like anxious and cling on to them and be like, come back, which is usually, you see that in relationships a lot where it's like, no, don't break up with me, come back. Or you can be avoidant attachment, which is where you're like, I feel someone getting close to me, I need to protect myself, so they, we shut them out. So that was my mechanism, was that anxious attachment style of just, oh, somebody's like starting to maybe have the potential to hurt me. Let me just make sure that doesn't happen. And in that time, I was very numb. I mean, I was not like feeling a lot of emotions. I was not feeling love. I wasn't feeling fear. I wasn't feeling like any of the emotions. And my life was very much jam-packed, so busy. Full-time college, full-time work, 3 jobs, working overtime, a million friends. Like I was the most social person you knew, just friends over here and friends over here. And I'm a part of this and I'm a part of this and I'm working and I'm doing all these things, never a moment to myself. Very physically active too, like running marathons, cycling long distances, lifting weight, like all this stuff, because it was all just like, don't feel anything.
Yeah. I would consider that definitely like a fight or flight mode, or not fight or flight. You're in survival mode at that point.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's an unhealthy space for your brain and your body to be in long term, because that causes other issues you have to deconstruct from later on.
Which has been my journey the last few years once I came out of that.
Yeah. Oh man.
Okay, yeah, so to be respectful of your time, let's jump into the last couple of points that we wanted to hit and give you opportunity to speak to. Where are you at now in regards to your faith journey or your unpacking journey or whatever you want to call it?
Well, I went, again, one extreme to the other, because I went into very much like agnostic, didn't want to think about any type of religion, any type of anything, just like, what we see is what's here, that kind of a thing. But I am a very spiritual person. Like I'm super intuitive and like, so I often missed being a Christian. It was like I missed believing in God. It was like I would think sometimes, like, I remember just believing in that so much. And I was like, I would love to have something to believe in like that again. And that, that sense of like, oh, well, there's a reason why things are happening because God has a plan. And when you don't think that God has a plan, then it's chaos and what do you have? So that was like just in the background, I guess. At some point I went to therapy.
We approve. Therapy is good for your body and your soul and your mind.
Yeah, we love therapy. The culmination
of things happened and I really hit a rock bottom moment in life. And I went to therapy, started to thaw out the,
good for you.
Freeze mode, the numbness, all of that. And in that point, I got a book, stumbled upon a book called Modern Day Shaman, and was reading it. It just intrigued me. There was this British woman who was in Peru for years and years and became an initiated shaman, and she like does that as a business now. She ended up becoming my mentor. Spoiler alert.
Cool.
Because her book changed my life. Because she had these like recorded shamanic journeys, and I was like doing them. I remember being in therapy and the therapist would ask classic questions like, oh, well, what does that feeling feel like? And it's like, well, I don't know. And it's like, she would ask things like, what do you need? To ask yourself what you need. And it's like, I don't know. And with this, because what you do is you relax your logical brain and you get into the subconscious mind, into the beta, theta brainwaves. And I was finding answers like to questions that I'd been asking. And I was feeling feelings and like seeing all the colors and all the things that you want to see in therapy, but I wasn't able to with therapy, but with this, I was able to. And so that just like, that opened up a whole door for me. And I ended up like finding that woman online and signing up for her like program that she had. And from that point, now I've become very spiritual. I'm very into this type of like shamanism and hypnosis and connection to nature, and I'm very into herbalism and plants, and like that's totally my jam. Like I literally even have a business where I do that, where I teach people marketing, but it's all from like an inner work perspective. It's like, okay, let's get the
Wow.
confidence to build your business, and we're going to go into like your subconscious, and we're going to like open up to your spiritual side and learn these things about marketing and business and stuff. So
Wow.
yeah, like I said, it's always a journey, but I do really feel like I've found my thing that I really like love, and I'm like, yeah, this is totally my thing and what I do now.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just happy you found a healthy way to live. 'Cause that was a big deal coming
Yeah.
from where we came from. We didn't know how to
Yes.
live a healthy
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
And
And
that
I
looks
wasn't
different
for
for
so
everyone.
long. Yeah, for so long. It was like the most self-destructive behavior, you know,
Yeah.
like dating terrible people,
Mm.
abusing my body with eating disorders and alcohol and I mean, really all the things.
Yeah.
Constantly picking up and moving to new cities, like
Mm-hmm.
doing super dangerous stuff, not having a place to stay at night, and like going in and going with random people in cars, and like
Yeah.
really quite
Not great.
self-destructive behavior, because you do have these subconscious beliefs. I do think that I had this belief that was like, I don't want to live, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was just like, one, I needed the adrenaline. I needed things to like feel
Yeah.
alive. And yeah, so then like these things where you're just like, well, I don't care if I die. I don't care if something bad happens, because you
Mhm.
just need like the
Mm.
adrenaline rush from it.
That's
Well,
quite the journey. You've
thank
Yeah.
you
come
so
so
much for
far.
sharing with us. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's great to
thanks
hear
for
your
holding this
story.
space. A lot of things I was like, wow, I didn't actually say that before.
Well, I'm personally very proud of you for how far you've come, because I know what it was
Yes.
like before, and now where you
Super
are is just
proud.
like, look at me go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gosh, from knowing you from so long ago and knowing like a lot of like the home life stuff even before
Yeah.
you left and
Yeah.
everything,
Mhm.
like wow. Cuz
Yeah,
that was rough.
You're doing
it
great,
was.
Mayo.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
both.
As our final closing, I'll ask the last question, and then Cassie, you want to do our
Mhm.
sign out? She
Of
has this cute
course.
little sign out thing that she does. I love it. So Mia, any final advice or comments that you have for our listeners who may be going through something similar?
I would say, like, start educating yourself on the systems of power that are in place in the world right now, because I definitely found studying things like feminism, for example, very freeing, to start to be able to see even TikTok accounts by
Mhm.
Okay.
feminists, you know, where people are like teaching feminist concepts, because what happens is they point out behaviors that you didn't realize were a problem,
Mm.
and that you've just been accepting because you have all these beliefs. Like I said, I had the belief like I don't want to live, or these things. There are
Yeah.
all kinds of beliefs that we all have, that are in our embedded in our bodies and beliefs and minds and everything. And so the more that you can just like have things pointed out to you, and the more that you can meet people who believe differently than that, and the more you can hear these other perspectives and see things in a different light, that's just going to be the most helpful thing, because you can then begin to decide like who you are as a person, and how you want to be treated in the world, and get
Mm-hmm.
to know yourself and what you actually want to do. That was definitely something that was a long journey for me too. I mean, I worked every job you can imagine under the
Yeah.
sun trying to find what I wanted to do, which
Mhm.
again is typical for all people.
I mean, yeah.
But especially when you're in a society that's like, don't get to know yourself, don't respect yourself, believe that you don't deserve any good thing, believe that you shouldn't think for yourself. You should obey other people, like, especially in a society that like really nails that into you. Like, start to get to know yourself and start to get to know what you actually care about, and start to see like behaviors that are being pointed out where you can go, oh yeah, that's actually not okay for me to be treated like that.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Self-realization is a
Yes,
huge
for
thing
sure.
for all
Yeah.
of us. Doesn't matter what you believe. You need to, do that digging.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening today. We were so excited to have you, Mia,
Yeah.
on our podcast. We love holding this space for you guys to feel safe and secure and be able to share all of these thoughts and stories that you have. If you guys ever want to reach out to us, share your story or tell us anything, you can reach us on our website, shortskirtslongscripture.com. We're on Instagram at Skirts and Scripture, or send us an email, skirtsandscripture@gmail.com. See you guys next time.
It's pretty cool.
I think I have kids ringing my doorbell. It's Christmas here. It's like Orthodox
It's
Christmas.
still Christmas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And